Look, you have to understand something right away. This isn't just a story about a janitor. This is a story about a genius who was forced to become a ghost. Her name was Alara Vance, and at 24, she carried a secret that weighed more than her entire cleaning cart. That secret wasn't a mistake. It was a qualification. It was a fugitive kind of brilliance, the kind that could save a life in 20 seconds but cost her 20 years in a federal pen. The thing is, Alara wasn't just good at cleaning. She was a revolutionary in her former life, a pioneer in a forbidden, unregulated field known as Project Chimera. Her expertise wasn't scalpel and suture, it was ultrasonic trauma remediation and deep tissue foreign body extraction. She knew how to use focused sonic frequencies to target and expel metal fragments from complex biological systems without making a single incision. This technology, fast, efficient, and devastatingly effective, had been outlawed by a paranoid, entrenched medical establishment that prioritized slow, expensive, traditional surgery over radical, life-saving speed. If they found out what she truly knew, what she was truly capable of, Alara Vance wasn't just fired. She was looking at the obliteration of her freedom, her life, and her entire future. She was a grenade that had been tossed, but the pin was still hanging loose, waiting for the wrong jolt. Her hiding place, her self-imposed exile, was the Chiron Institute. It was a $500 million cathedral of corporate medicine, all gleaming marble, polished chrome, and cold, relentless perfection. Alara was an environmental specialist on the night shift, pushing her heavy cart, a rolling monument to her own suppressed potential. The air in the facility was thick with the scent of industrial cleaner, ozone from the air handlers, and the faint, unsettling sterile tang of antiseptic. Every time she buffed the surgical theater floor, every time she restocked a cart with plastic-wrapped syringes, she was reminded of the immense, coiled energy she was forced to suppress. She was a high-performance engine idling in neutral, and the fear was that one day, she would simply forget how to shift into gear. The sheer irony was a physical ache. She had the training to stabilize a battlefield casualty with a multi-tool in 2 minutes, but here, she was told to mop up a spill in the VIP waiting lounge. The other staff mostly looked right through her, or at best, offered a condescending nod. This anonymity was her shield, her prison, and her deepest, most isolating burden. She missed the dry heat of the fringe camps, the smell of hot metal and high-frequency generators. She missed the terrifying clarity of knowing that every single second mattered. Here, the seconds just dissolved into the slow, agonizing drip of her life. Then there was Dr. Julian Kane. The chief neurosurgeon was a caricature of arrogance. He wore his authority like a tailored, impenetrable suit, expensive, sharp, and designed to minimize everyone else around him. Kane's greatest professional love was the protocol, the rigid, unbending structure that protected his ego and his position. He saw Alara, the young black woman in the green uniform, as an insignificant, disposable resource, a smudge to be polished away. The petty slights were constant. One evening, Alara had noticed a massive, inexplicable voltage fluctuation on the backup power grid during a minor procedure. She quietly mentioned it to the nearest resident, knowing a drop in power could scramble the high-tech mapping array. Kane had overheard, stopping the surgery dead. He didn't thank her, he didn't even acknowledge the safety hazard. Instead, he had walked over to her, his face a mask of patronizing disdain, and announced loudly, "Ms. Vance, your jurisdiction ends at the baseboard. I suggest you concern yourself with the cleanliness of the environment, not the complexity of the machinery. Is that clear?" The public dismissal, the reduction of her genius to baseboards, had felt like a physical blow. But she had simply nodded, her jaw tight, and continued polishing the stainless steel until her reflection was distorted with tension. The price of hiding was obedience, and she always paid it. But the night of the code black would demand a payment far greater than simple obedience. It would demand everything. It started not with an alarm, but with a palpable shift in the institution's temperature. The routine, dull stress of a Tuesday night vanished, replaced by a sudden, glacial coldness. The red priority phone at the charge desk, the one that connected unofficially to Joint Command, rang once, a sharp, digital trill. The head nurse, Brenda, one of the few who treated Alara with professional indifference instead of contempt, snatched it up, and the color drained from her face.
Code red. Single patient.
GSWs, multiple, high caliber. ETA 2 minutes. The brevity was horrifying. No vitals. No mechanism of injury. Just the grim designation that meant a military-grade problem was coming. The entire emergency department snapped into a high-tension readiness. But this wasn't a civilian car crash. This was violence, organized and terrifyingly precise. Before the 2 minutes were up, the ambulance bay doors were blasted open, not by a standard city ambulance, but by a black, armored SUV with tinted, reinforced glass. 2 men in tactical gear, moving with a controlled, predatory grace, wheeled in a gurney. Their boots hit the highly polished floor, the floor Alara had just spent an hour treating, with a hard, rhythmic thud that did not belong. It was the sound of the outside world, the world Alara was trained for, invading her sterile hiding place. The patient they wheeled in was an anatomical disaster. He was soaked in blood that looked black under the fluorescent lights, but what truly froze Alara was the uniform. It was shredded tactical wear, high-grade armor, but over it, a ghost of military structure remained. And on the tattered collar, 4 faint, shining points, the insignia of a 4-star general. This wasn't just a patient.
This was an asset.
This was General Marcus Thorne. Dr. Kane, initially startled by the tactical entry, quickly tried to reclaim his kingdom.
Get those men out. This is a sterile environment.
I am in charge here. He waved off the grim-faced tactical operators, already posturing. Alara's own internal warning system was screaming. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, the rhythm not fear, but analysis. The wounds, she didn't need a medical degree. She had field experience. There were over 20 points of entry, small, dark, and precise, concentrated in soft tissue and joint areas.
These were not random shots.
They were fragmentation rounds, designed not to kill instantly, but to cripple, to shatter, and to bleed a man out through systemic failure. The monitors began to cascade alarms, a deafening, continuous shriek of failure. The general had no palpable blood pressure. He was pale, gray, and his eyes were already glazing over. Dr. Kane was visibly overwhelmed. He was searching for a single primary bleeder, a textbook answer, and finding 30 secondary ones.
Where is the volume going?
We're pumping O negative, but he's not holding pressure, he shouted, sweating profusely, the expensive white coat failing to shield him from the sheer, unmanageable reality of the trauma. Alara moved closer to the viewing window, her janitorial cart, carrying her hidden expertise, quietly humming beside her. She didn't need a monitor. She didn't need an ultrasound. She had the data in her bones. The volume isn't going anywhere, doctor, she muttered to herself, her mind a supercomputer running diagnostics. It's being constantly breached. He is in disseminated intravascular coagulation DIC, masked by overwhelming fragmentation. The pieces of metal are acting as tiny, circulating knives, preventing coagulation and causing constant, widespread leaks. You cannot repair a single vessel when the entire system is actively being destroyed from the inside. The solution was brutal, illegal, and immediate, total foreign body removal. She pushed the door open, the audacity of the act silencing the room instantly. Her feet carried her directly into the sterile field, deliberately violating the sacred space. Doctor, Alara said, her voice quiet but carrying the force of undeniable truth. The bleed is not stopping because the system is clogged. The fragmentation is too widespread. You have to remove the circulating foreign bodies first, all 20-plus pieces. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Dr. Kane stopped the delicate arterial repair he was fumbling with. He turned, slowly, his face white with disbelief, then dark with the coldest fury Alara had ever witnessed. He saw the green uniform, the sweat dripping from her brow, the cleaning cart parked like an insult at the entrance. "Excuse me, Ms. Vance," he drawled, his voice a lethal, controlled whisper. "Did you just try to lecture me, the chief neurosurgeon, on the pathophysiology of a combat wound? You manage the biohazard, I manage the patient. Your expertise is wax, mine is the human brain." He walked directly toward her, his presence a wall of institutional arrogance. He didn't just reprimand her, he made her humiliation a spectacle for the entire trauma team. He pointed a shaking, gloved finger at her chest. "You are not a doctor.
You are not a nurse.
You are barely even an aide. You are an environmental specialist.
Get out of my sterile field, now.
And if you ever interrupt my surgery again, you are terminated on the spot and I will personally call security." Alara felt the weight of the system, the title, the uniform, the bias, the crushing reality of her low position, burying her alive. She gripped her hands until the crescent moons of her nails dug into her palms, but she forced herself to nod, her eyes locked on the floor. "Yes, doctor." She retreated to the hallway, but the cold stone of shame had cracked, and beneath it, a white-hot core of rage was forming. Alara was pulling her cleaning cart toward the elevator, the humiliation of burning metallic taste in her mouth, when the trauma bay erupted. It wasn't just noise, it was the sharp, piercing, unbroken tone of the code black alarm. The general's monitor had gone into pulseless electrical activity. The heart was firing, but there was nothing left to pump. Alara sprinted back. The scene was terminal. Dr. Kane, defeated, was stripping his gloves. "Stop compressions," he commanded, his voice hollow. "Time of death is 2:05. We followed every protocol. It was non-survivable." That word, non-survivable, was a direct strike at the core of Alara's identity. It was the regulatory mandate. You must let the patient die because the solution is too dangerous, too fast, too unconventional. Alara looked at the general. He was dying because of debris, not doctrine. His life depended on something radical, something that required tools and skills she had been forbidden to possess, and which she had illegally brought into this hospital. The choice was no longer about a job, it was about her freedom versus the life of a 4-star general.
Choice A, walk away. Keep her secret.
Go home a fugitive, but a free one. The general dies by the book.
Choice B, expose everything.
Use the forbidden technology. Save the general.
Go to prison.
The seconds stretched into millennia. The silence in the bay was deafening, the only sound the persistent, lethal monotone of the flatline. She looked at the general, pale and still, and the rage that had been coiling inside her since her training days broke loose. She would not let this man die for the sake of Dr. Kane's ego or a bureaucratic fear of the truth. Alara pushed her cleaning cart through the double doors, the wheels squeaking a defiant sound in the silence. Her hands, steady as a combat surgeon's, went to the cart's lower compartment, the locked, discreet area designated for specialized floor buffers. Inside, in a small, unmarked steel case, lay the unregulated ultrasonic probe. This wasn't just a tool, it was the physical embodiment of her crime. The probe, sleek and metallic, with a glowing blue tip, was the centerpiece of Project Chimera. The sheer adrenaline of the moment made her movements hyper-precise. She felt the cold, hard weight of the steel in her hand, the power to save, and the certainty of ruin. "Stop!" Dr. Kane shrieked, finally realizing the janitor was not simply leaving.
"Security,"
I said, "get her out." Alara ignored him. She clamped the probe's small, high-frequency power pack to the gurney rail. The act itself was a violation of 10 separate safety codes. A low, barely audible harmonic hum began to fill the bay, a frequency only dogs and geniuses could truly appreciate. It was the sound of forbidden science powering up. "The patient is dying from fragments, doctor." Alara roared, the engineer fully in command. "They're too small, too deep. Your scalpel will kill him. I have to remove the primary fragmentation load now." Dr. Kane, realizing the magnitude of the janitor's transgression, lunged. He grabbed Alara's arm, his mask pulled slightly down, his eyes wide with terrified fury. "You are under arrest. You will not touch my patient." Alara reacted not as a janitor, but as a person who had trained in dynamic takedowns. With a cold, brutal efficiency, she used Kane's forward momentum against him, a sharp pivot of her elbow and hip, sending the chief neurosurgeon staggering backward into a crash cart with a sickening, metallic clatter. The 2 security guards finally reached her, grappling with her shoulders. "Ma'am, you have to stop. This is a police matter now." "Get off me!" Alara snarled, the sound not human, but the raw, focused growl of a predator. She broke free with a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength.
She had seconds.
She had to breach the tissue. She drove the tip of the probe to the general's worst wound cluster in his flank.
It wasn't a cut.
It was the application of silent, focused energy. The probe began to oscillate, creating a miniature, controlled sonic field deep within the tissue. The field targeted only the density of the metal fragments, causing them to vibrate violently, separating them from the soft tissue that held them captive. This was the blackout protocol, the last-ditch effort that risked everything. Alara's focus narrowed to a pinprick. She could feel the vibrations through her fingertips, a faint, internal buzzing sensation. Slowly, impossibly, small, dark beads of metal began to emerge on the general's skin, pushed out by the silent frequency. She used surgical tweezers to sweep them onto a sterile tray. 1 fragment. 2 fragments. 3. The tension in the bay was so thick, the air felt like sludge. The entire trauma team was paralyzed, watching the janitor perform an illegal miracle. Kane lay sprawled by the crash cart, staring, his authority dissolved in the face of impossible competence. 10 fragments.
The count kept rising. 15. 19. 20.
She swept the final, minute piece onto the tray. 20+ lethal pieces of shrapnel. And then, the sound that shattered the silence. The flat line broke.
Beep. Pause. Beep beep.
A slow, thready, but undeniably functional sinus rhythm returned. The circulating volume was clear. The general's body shuddered, taking a massive, rattling breath, the first breath he had taken as a living man since his arrival. Alara yanked the probe back, her body shaking from the adrenaline dump. She looked down at the general, then up at Dr. Kane, who was slowly pulling himself to his feet. "Dr. Kane," she commanded, her voice exhausted but absolutely firm. "The system is clear. The bleed is manageable now because the internal knives are out. You fix the vascular damage I just contained. Get in here and save your general." Shaken, ashamed, and terrified, the chief neurosurgeon picked up a vascular clamp. He looked at the janitor who had just saved his patient and his reputation. He knew, deep in his cold, arrogant heart, that he had failed, and that she had triumphed. He stepped forward and, following her implied direction, began the necessary, now possible repairs. The general was stabilized 2 hours later, now resting in the surgical ICU. Alara, her green uniform stained with sweat and the faint scent of ozone from the illegal probe, was sitting in the hospital's legal office. She was surrounded by the chief administrator, the hospital lawyer, and a meticulously composed, profoundly dangerous Dr. Kane. The morning sun was painting the Tacoma skyline in a bruised, indifferent purple. The atmosphere was an oppressive, suffocating judgment. The lawyer, a man who spoke only in liabilities, detailed her crimes. "You violated every OSHA standard. You committed assault. You brought unlicensed, unsanctioned technology into a sterile environment." Had the general not survived, the general's death, coupled with the unlicensed equipment, would be a federal security disaster. The legal exposure to this hospital is catastrophic. Dr. Kane, looking clean and composed, stared at his clasped hands, refusing to meet her eyes. When he spoke, his voice was thick with venomous, injured pride. What she did was not medicine. It was reckless, anarchic butchery. She bypassed every safety regulation for a moment of personal, ego-driven chaos. The ends do not justify the illegal means. "The general is alive, Doctor," Alara stated, her voice void of emotion, the only truth that mattered. "Coincidentally." Kane shot back, his eyes finally meeting hers, and they were filled not with gratitude, but with the hateful, terrified resentment of a small man who had been utterly exposed. The administrator slid the papers across the desk. "Your employment is terminated. Sign this severance agreement and non-disclosure clause. We will not press criminal charges or report this to the Federal Regulatory Board if you sign."
Alara picked up the pen.
This was the final price. Save the life, lose the job, escape the prison. She signed the papers, the ink sealing her civilian death. She walked out of the office, a ghost in a stolen t-shirt and hospital pants, heading toward the bus stop, carrying only the vast, empty feeling of loss. She had nowhere to go, but she was free, a freedom she had bought at the cost of her life's purpose. She was walking down a side street, the air cold and damp, when the black SUV pulled up. The windows were tinted, the plates specialized, the kind that disappear the moment you look away. The passenger window glided down with a silent, hydraulic hiss. "Alara Vance," a woman's voice said. It was smooth, professional, and utterly commanding. "I'm not in the mood for a citation," Alara replied, not breaking her stride, the reflex of the fugitive still strong. "Ultrasonic foreign body remediation on a 4-star asset, resulting in the extraction of 20+ fragmentation rounds," the woman said, opening her door and falling into step beside Alara. "That's on page 1 of the Project Chimera Blackout Protocol."
Alara stopped dead. The name.
The terrifying, forbidden name of her life's work. "My name is Agent Thorne," the woman confirmed, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Your file states you fled the regulatory board because you refused to let your methods be shackled by fear and bureaucratic cowardice. We've been tracking you for 6 months. Dr. Kane's security footage, along with a full medical analysis of the procedure, was delivered to us 5 hours ago. The man driving, a silent, severe man, opened the back door of the SUV. General Marcus Thorne, he stated, his voice low and firm. His mission was not a defense op. He was en route to recruit you. Alara's world tilted. The numbness cracked. The pieces of the impossible night suddenly snapped into perfect, terrifying focus. He was coming for her. The general had been hit by a rival industrial cell minutes before he reached the hospital. They knew he was meeting an engineer. They just didn't know the engineer was the janitor. Agent Thorne's expression finally shifted, showing a profound, unmistakable respect. Dr. Kane fired you from a life you hated. The general, who is alive and well because of your criminal brilliance, sent us to retrieve you. She gestured to the open car door. We are offering you the one you were trained for. The Project Chimera team is still operating underground, and they need their lead engineer, the real one. The one who breaks the rules to save the life. Alara looked back at the institution, at the place that had made her small. She looked at the scars on her hands, the memory of the general's heart shuddering back to life. Then she looked into the dark, quiet interior of the SUV. It wasn't prison. It was the future. It was the recognition her genius deserved.
She stepped inside.
The door clicked shut, final and absolute. The SUV pulled away, melting into the gray, wet morning. The system had tried to bury the black female janitor in the basement, but her defiance had just set her free, ready for a life that changed forever, a life where her crime was her qualification.